And the question is about let me find it so that I can read it out loud to you. I've heard that there aren't really any testing labs in Missouri. So marijuana is effectively legal just by telling the officer that it's actually CBD. Also, as a CBD user, how would a stop usually go if I had a bag of CBD flower in the car?
Okay, well, first off, I'm not convinced CBD is legal, but most people, most cops even seem to think it is. So if you have flower and it's hemp, I think is really what the question is here. If it's below a 0.03% THC, then it is hemp and it is not marijuana under Missouri or federal law any longer. But the burden of proof, I think for the time being at least, is going to be on us to prove that it's below 0.03. Now, if you go to trial, it is certainly legitimate to argue that the prosecutor's failure to prove that there's above a 0.03 THC content may be grounds for a dismissal. As far as I know, nobody's actually won that argument yet, but I would certainly agree that's a legitimate argument, and that ought to result in a dismissal. But you don't want to have to go to trial and then find out if you're going to be convicted or not. That's not the ideal way to resolve this situation. So the question is, if a cop sees something that looks to him like marijuana and you tell him it's CBD or hemp, is he going to accept that argument? Probably not. You're probably going to be arrested, and you're probably going to have to go to court, and then your lawyer can try to persuade the prosecutor that you shouldn't have been arrested, and this is really CBD. And if you're certain that it is below a 0.03 THC content, I'd recommend you have your own test done. Now, there are at least 4 licensed testing laboratories operating in Missouri right now, according to Greenway, and I think they're generally accurate about this. There are at least 4 Missouri testing labs operating. And one of the things about Article 14 that is good is that, unlike, I think, even Colorado, a private grower can't have his or her cannabis tested, but we can in Missouri. I read recently somebody said they thought that labs were charging as little as $25. Now, I find that hard to believe, but I hope it's true. At any rate, depending on the price, you can have legally grown medical cannabis tested by the laboratories in Missouri. And again, I believe there are 4 of them operating. Greenway is a good source of information, as is DHSS, of course. So do you have to inform the police you're recording them? That's a good question, because in a lot of jurisdictions you do, but Missouri is not one of those jurisdictions. We actually have several very good laws here in Missouri, and I point that out to people who trash Missouri, who say Missouri is just a joke, Missouri is a horrible place, Missouri has awful laws, I'm moving to New York or something. Missouri has a lot of great laws. One of them is that you do not have to inform the police or anybody else that you're recording them. Now, if you record 2 other people, yes, they have to be informed. In other words, one party to the conversation has to know about the recording, but not both. So you can't just wiretap, somebody's phone. But if you are recording a conversation in which you are a conversant, in which you are a party, you do not have to inform the police or your probation officer. I've had people say, my probation officer is picking on me, he's threatening me, he's saying horrible things to me. And I say, well, for God's sake, take a recorder into your next meeting with that probation officer and record what he's saying, because, we've got no credibility unless we can prove that these improper threats and statements are being made. You do not have to tell the police. You do not have to tell your probation officer. Now, I don't recommend you go into court and make a recording. Most judges will certainly frown on that. But anywhere outside of court, you can absolutely record anybody and everybody all day long, as long as you're part of the conversation that's being recorded. Yes, Patrick, wear a effing seatbelt. I think Claire's recording this and probably get me in trouble with somebody, but yes, I think you can watch it later.
Yeah, I'm going to try and put it on Facebook for anyone who's wondering. This is recorded. I just need to make sure I can figure it out on my own.
I'll try to be a little more circumspect.
And Dan, you have a question from Crystal. I'm sorry, words. And her question is, so smell is not probable cause. With card, what about an officer saying those ZigZags are probable cause because people open them and put stuff in it?
Okay, I'm looking at this message too. Those ZigZags are probable cause people open up. Oh, no, it's not. Of course, it's not up to the cop, and there's no point in arguing with the cop. Don't talk to the cop. But in the old days, before medical marijuana was legal, I would concede that the presence of ZigZags might, I would certainly argue against it, but might be considered a probable cause. But once you establish you are a legal medical marijuana patient, once you show your card to a cop, ZigZags are not probable cause for a search. I say that based on my opinion, and I think that's what the courts will rule. Neither marijuana paraphernalia, nor marijuana itself, nor the smell of marijuana is probable cause for a search if the individual in possession of those items shows the cop his or her medical marijuana card. That argument, I think we will win. What else we got here? It's a federal crime. Yeah, God damn it. Not for much longer, but Judy Farrelly says, I'm still confused why it is still a federal crime and how they can say there's no medical value with marijuana. Well, it won't be a federal crime for long. Judy, I mentioned earlier that the majority leader of the United States Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, has declared repeatedly that legalizing marijuana federally is among his highest priorities. The United States House of Representatives voted to repeal federal prohibition in December. They will vote to do it again. Good old Nancy will make sure that they get a chance to vote on it again. Chuck will make sure the Senate gets a chance to vote on it again. I had some misgivings I still have some misgivings over whether Joe is going to sign that bill when it comes to his desk in the Oval Office. But most people think that Kamala will get him to sign it. And I certainly hope that's true. I mean, Joe Biden was a drug war hawk when he was in the Senate. He was a jerk. He was an opportunist. He would not hesitate to grandstand and try to get himself reelected by being tough on drugs. But even Joe now understands that the worm has turned, that line just doesn't get the response it used to, that being tough on drugs is kind of stupid, it's kind of out of date, it's kind of passe. And I think that Joe Biden will sign that legalization. It's not going to be against federal law much longer. And all those probation officers that claim that's their concern. And the Missouri Supreme Court that claims they're so worried about us lawyers helping somebody violate federal statutes, it just won't have that argument any longer. I mean, folks, this is real. This is coming. This is likely to be the law by the end of this year. This is very exciting. Yeah, the DEA can fight all they want, but they're not that powerful. They'll still have jobs. There's plenty of meth out there. There's a lot of other drugs out there, a lot more productive. I think that the DEA won't like it, but they're not that powerful. They're not going to be able to stop it. And so what else? Oh, and here's a couple of other things I want to make sure to cover. And I'm going to probably cut this off at 9 o'clock, but it seems like there's still people interested, so I'm willing to go on to at least that time. But here, if you're going down the highway and you see a sign that says drug checkpoint ahead, usually a little temporary orange sign set up, and then you'll see another sign, almost always you'll see another sign, drug dog on duty, and then you will see an exit. And, why will there be an exit after that? Well, that's because there is no drug checkpoint ahead. That sign is a LIE, a tactic of law enforcement, which is frequently used. One of their greatest tools is to LIE. And so there is no drug checkpoint ahead. There is kind of a drug checkpoint at the next exit. If you take that exit, you will indeed encounter law enforcement. All you got to do to avoid the drug checkpoint is do not, no matter how bad you have to pee, no matter whether your grandma's dying, off that next exit, do not take the next exit after you see a sign that says drug checkpoint ahead. That's what they want you to do. The courts in Missouri have said, yeah, it's okay to lie to the public and to mislead them into believing there's a drug checkpoint ahead when there's not, when it's really at the next exit. And the appeals courts have actually said the fact that you take that exit in itself is basis for suspicion. Now, what the cops will do is they'll manufacture some lame excuse to stop you. They'll claim to observe a traffic law violation. They'll stop you, or you may have to stop. Often, of course, you'll see, most of the time, you're going to see a stop sign at that exit. You have to stop. And then they'll approach your vehicle. And sometimes they'll have a dog with them on a short leash. I saw a cop one time, this happened to me at a DWI checkpoint. He said, "Oh, let me see your driver's license." He takes my license and holds it under the nose of his German Shepherd dog, like he's expecting his dog, and I'm sure it's happened. Thank goodness I had not used my driver's license to sift seeds and stems, but I've seen a lot of people do that in the old days. I've even heard that some people may take their driver's license and line up white powder to snort with it. But for God's sake, don't use your driver's license for drugs, for any kind of drug activity. Don't break the law, of course, but don't use your driver's license for that purpose, of all things. But again, the best policy is don't break the traffic laws. However, if you see a drug checkpoint ahead, and I know I've felt this myself, there's an incredible force that almost, is pushing you to turn your wheel to the right and to take that exit, even though you know what the trick is. Don't let that happen. Don't give in to that force. Don't take the exit, and you'll be okay. Do not litter. Do not litter. If you see a drug checkpoint ahead, that's the only time the cops are actually going to stop you for littering. As far as I can tell, nobody ever gets stopped for littering unless you tear up a ticket in front of a cop. I've seen people charged with littering then. But if you toss anything out of a motor vehicle in the vicinity of a drug checkpoint, you will be stopped for littering, if nothing else. And they will recover your litter, and they will charge you with possession of that litter if it's anything illegal. So, don't speed even a little bit. Signal every lane change before and during the lane change. Signal before and during any turn, left or right. And just don't take the next exit when you see a drug checkpoint sign ahead. I also want people to be aware that the police are allowed to search your garbage. If you put your garbage out to be picked up, if you put it on the public right-of-way, and sometimes it's not easy to know exactly where that public right-of-way is, and it depends on what city you're in and how your curb is constructed and arranged. But the point is, if you set your garbage out to be picked up by the garbage guys, it's fair game for the cops. They don't have to have a reason. They don't have to have any excuse to take your garbage and go through it with a fine-tooth comb and Fido by their side and look at every little thing in your garbage. And that's an incredibly invasive thing to do. The courts indulge in this fiction that they will protect us against unreasonable violations of our expectations, unreasonable expectations, violations of our reasonable expectation of privacy. And they'll tell us what's reasonable. Well, I'll tell you that every person I know thinks that his or her garbage they can reasonably expect will be private. I mean, we all put stuff in the garbage that we could never expect anybody to find and look at. I mean, bills and correspondence with friends and family, labels, a High Times subscription card, an empty pack of ZigZag papers, or for God's sake, don't dump an ashtray into your garbage. I don't care if there's no roaches in there. A dog is going to smell and alert and respond to the remains of anything illegal that's in an ashtray. So be very careful what you put in the trash. Don't put anything in the trash that might even hint at anything illegal. if you don't want your house to be ransacked. What they do is they go through your garbage with a fine-tooth comb and a dog there sniffing it, and then if they get a response or they find that high time subscription card, maybe not by itself, but in combination with other, suspicions, they'll get a search warrant from a judge based on what they found in your garbage. They don't need a search warrant to search your garbage, but they need a search warrant to search your house under most circumstances, and they'll get it if you put stuff in your garbage that indicates that there is illegal activity taking place. And even patients. I'm talking to patients as well here. It's really easy to get this sense of confidence, and you should be able to feel confident that you're going to be left alone when you're engaged in legal activity. But nobody wants to go through that. I guarantee you, it is not fun. You may be arrested. You may be essentially required to hire a lawyer to assert your defense that you are a patient. It shouldn't take that, but it does often. So don't, patients, I advise patients and caregivers to be just as careful as they should be if they're not legal. Don't invite the police. Don't give the police that excuse. They don't have to check and see if you're a legal patient. And when they come to your house with a search warrant and then you show them your card, they're not going to understand, so sorry, please forgive me, and walk away. They're going to go ahead and ransack your house. Don't do those things. Don't give them that opportunity. Don't put anything in your garbage that you wouldn't want a police officer or a judge or a prosecutor to find. Gosh, what else? Those are a couple of points I wanted to be sure to cover here because those are common tactics. Searching your garbage is common. Stopping at a drug checkpoint, they call it a ruse, R-U-S-E, a ruse checkpoint in the police reports. Just the fact that you took that exit may not be enough to get a car search, but it's a big contributing factor. What do you do with your trash then? Well, if you have stuff you want to dispose of that you'd rather not be have found in your garbage, I suggest that most convenience stores and gas stations provide trash receptacles. Those are very convenient. Your garbage disposal can be your friend. Your toilet can be your friend. For small things that aren't going to stop up the toilet or the garbage disposal, if you've got something you'd rather not have in your trash, those are some ways to dispose of it. But the other way is just take those items in a little plain brown bag and toss them in the convenience store or gas station trash receptacle, which is not at all likely to be searched. As an endorsement for Raw's rolling papers, I think they're made from hemp. What do other cultivators do with grow trash? Well, might get some answers. I can't answer that necessarily, but don't leave it in your garbage unless you want to have a close encounter with law enforcement. Let's see what else. Here's a caregiver question. Oh, and that reminds me, before I answer this question, let me point out that every patient should have at least one caregiver. Even if you don't think you need a caregiver, why would you not bestow on another human being, someone that you care about, the ability to legally possess cannabis, the ability to purchase cannabis at a dispensary for the patient, of course, but nonetheless, being a caregiver provides a very high degree of immunity from conviction. You may get arrested, you may get prosecuted, but by God, the Missouri Constitution is pretty darn clear. The caregiver can do everything except consume cannabis, everything that a patient can do. For $25, you can have a primary caregiver and a secondary caregiver. Why not invite your friend, your lover, your husband, your wife, your child, your parents, whoever it is that might be able to provide you with some additional care and might need the protection that being a caregiver gives to that person. It's just, it distresses me every time I read the weekly patient and caregiver numbers that we've got. What are we up to, 77,000 or 75,000 almost approved patients in the state now? But the number of caregivers is a tiny little fraction of that, like 3,000 to 4,000 caregivers. That's a shame. That's a shame. I just don't think people realize how important it can be to for every patient to have at least one caregiver. But the question here is, what constitutes a significant responsibility on behalf of a patient? That question has not been answered, but it is intended to be rather broad. I would say opening the car door, that's a nice thing to do for people. It could be a back rub, and I'm not being entirely facetious here. It can be really anything that is of assistance to a patient. If that patient has pain, then the caregiver, indeed, a back rub, a head rub, maybe a significant relief of that pain. Is simply growing marijuana for them enough to satisfy the requirement? Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt of that. I mean, it really hadn't occurred to me that there would be any doubt of that. Growing marijuana for a patient is a very significant responsibility in and of itself. I don't think there's any doubt it would win in court. Has it been tried? No one needed to try it. I'm not aware of a single prosecution of a caregiver because they didn't have significant responsibility. No prosecutor. I find it hard to believe any prosecutor would want to take on that case. So, frankly, I don't think you need to worry about significant responsibility. Make sure you can point to something you do for that patient. And growing cannabis for that patient is absolutely sufficient. I just don't think there's any doubt of that. I'm always open to other opinions and hearing other opinions, and I don't know about every medical marijuana case in Missouri, but I do try to keep up. Can someone convicted of a felony be a caregiver? Yes, absolutely, no doubt about it. You can be a caregiver. There's no restriction on people who have felony convictions being caregivers. Now, I think the misunderstanding or the impression that some people have that some people think you can't even be a patient if you have a felony conviction. That's not true either. The only restriction on felons is being owners, or I believe it's employees for that matter, of a dispensary or another licensed commercial medical marijuana facility is the term that we use, the generic term that means cultivators and testers and manufacturers and dispensaries, of course. Working in those facilities can be restricted because of a prior felony. But really, if you read it closely, at least after 5 years and having a non-violent felony conviction, you can go right ahead and do all of those things, own or work for any of those facilities, at least 5 years after the felony. Let's see here, what else? Is it possible to make a living growing as a caregiver for others? Well, I'd say it's possible, but not easy. But let me give you some good news. Let me tell you, I definitely want to talk about this before we close. As I said earlier, we are in the process right now of drafting an initiative to legalize adult use of marijuana, non-medical use of marijuana in Missouri, and we intend to place this initiative on the ballot in November of 2022. It's still in the process of being drafted, but there is no one I'm aware of who's objected to the proposal that's currently part of our working draft to increase the number of patients to 6. And so I would say, yes, certainly, if you have 6 patients who are relying on you as a caregiver to cultivate cannabis for them, we hope, yes, that you could make at least a modest living doing that. Or, it doesn't have to be your only job. It can supplement your income. And I think that's what it is for many caregivers right now. They have some other income and they supplement their income by being a caregiver for themselves and a couple of other patients. And that will increase with any luck, if things go as we hope and expect, that will increase to 6 patients after November of 2022. Somebody's pointed out MCIA has a caregiver certification program, and that's exactly right. Missouri Cannabis Industry Association, MCIA, does a lot of very good work, and they do have a caregiver certification program. You don't have to be certified, but not a bad idea. I think that's a real a good thing to do. You're right. Somebody says, I didn't think you could exchange money for cannabis, and that is correct. However, you can be paid for all of your expenses, and you can be paid for your time and your talent. And how much you charge for your time and talent is up to you. I mean, my God, lawyers charge hundreds of dollars an hour. I don't know how to grow cannabis. So, I mean, hell, you could say, well, a lawyer who can't even grow cannabis charges $250 an hour, so I think I can charge $300 an hour. I don't recommend that. But the point is that you know what your time is worth. The market determines how much your time is worth. If you're a talented caregiver, if you're a talented cultivator, and your patients choose to pay you $100 an hour for your work cultivating that cannabis, there's nothing illegal about that. But thank you, whoever made that comment, because you are not able to legally sell cannabis. That is true. But that doesn't prevent a caregiver from being paid, simply not for the cannabis, but rather for the time and trouble and talent and the considerable expense involved in setting up a cultivation operation. One lawyer, Pat Talks Law, Pat Nolan, has suggested that caregivers can charge for their time and know-how and supplies but cannot sell to their patients per weight. I absolutely agree with Pat Nolan on that. I think so. And yes, I think you can charge $100 an hour, not $100 an ounce, but you could charge $100 an hour. Make it clear. Don't sell by weight. Don't sell marijuana, period. But it is legal for caregivers to charge for their work and their time and their expenses. Let's see here. Any other questions? Can an applicant for an agent ID card who's a nonviolent felon over 5 years ago, but who was incarcerated for those prior felonies, get a card? I think the answer is yes. That's from Lance Davis, who certainly probably knows as much as I do about this. So, go to the source, go to Article 14 of the Missouri Constitution, find those provisions. But my recollection, I don't have it in front of me, my recollection is that a nonviolent felon over 5 years from the conviction can do everything anyone else can do. And so I don't think there shouldn't be any problem getting an agent card. An agent card concept is something that a lot of people are not aware of, but you're supposed to get an agent card from DHSS to work in a facility. I don't think a nonviolent felony 5 years earlier would stop that. See, I've been on and off due to signal. Did you answer probation parole? Can they say you cannot use? They can say it, but they don't have the power to revoke your probation. Probation and parole's taken a position, since it's still against federal law, that they won't allow it, but they can't stop it. Is the bottom line. They can drug test you. They can file a report with the judge. If the judge says, I'm going to let this person use medical marijuana on probation, the probation office can't do anything about it. Now, what they have said recently is, Judge, we want you to take this person off probation altogether. If we can't get them revoked for smoking marijuana, we don't even want to supervise them. And I say to that, please throw me in that briar patch. Yes, please take me off probation. Please make this court-supervised probation. I mean, that's kind of hilarious, really, that they think people are going to be upset that they can't be supervised by Missouri probation and parole. That's funny. Let's see. Claire, all right. Claire says she's going to try to make this available on Facebook, and I bet she'll get it done. Have I missed any other questions? Cannabis care team. We have cannabis nurses helping patients and are training bud tenders for proper and thoughtful patient interaction. A Missouri company. Well, I think that's a good service. CannabisCareTeam.com. All of you are in the chat room, right? If you haven't clicked on that little word balloon down at the bottom of the screen, go ahead and do it, and you can read a lot of interesting information here. Seems like there's a lot of money per plant. That's a mistake. A caregiver should not be quoting, I don't know, per plant. Maybe he can get away or she can get away with that, but it's not wise. It's the caregiver who is taking the risk, not the patient. The caregiver should not charge by the weight or by the marijuana, or even charging by the plant. I think is risky. It's maybe not as clear, but it's risky. Why do it? Why take that risk? There's no need to do that. Yeah, the Missouri Normal page. Certainly, I hope we'll have it up on the Missouri Normal page and the MU Normal page as well. I'm a nurse who can help with helping patients obtain their card. I work with very compassionate doctor. Oh, Pat Mayfield. Well, Pat, he's a great guy, a great cannabis nurse. Been very actively involved in the Missouri marijuana law reform movement for many years. I recommend Patrick Mayfield because I know him and trust him. And his phone number's in the chat room right now. You're very welcome. I enjoy talking to people about this. Yes, Claire?
Would it be okay if this video is eventually posted to Reddit and Missouri Medical? I don't see a problem with that because this was a public event.
Right.
Okay.
I don't see a problem with that. Let me just close out here. I think 90 minutes is a good time to wrap this up. We'll do it again. There seems to be a lot of interest. We've still got 28 people on the line, so thank you, all of you, very much. We'll do it again in a not too distant future. But in the meantime, let me say that I am not advising anybody to break the law. I'm not trying to help you break the law. I'm trying to help you know and exercise your constitutional rights. And that is surely a patriotic and appropriate civic activity for all of us. And I appreciate your time, and I have really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Be sure to mark your calendar March 20 for the online Spring 2021 Missouri Normal State Conference, and we'll be sending out information about that. Send us your email. If you're not on the Missouri Normal mailing list, would you send me your email, danviets@gmail.com, VIETS, danviets@gmail.com. Send me your email. We'll put you on the Missouri Normal list, or sign up online, of course. I'm such a dinosaur. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Claire, very much. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank you.